yo. I'm going to call him Do-Rag because he didn't give us no name. Brother Do-Rag.
These folks aren't playing and they're not discriminating.
It does feel to me very much like the beginning of the end of time.
We really about to all die.
It'd be a pretty damn depressed place to live if all we ever did was concentrate on the me of it all.
Sometimes I just want to say, shut the up. Like, stop talking and listen. I have to say, all empires fall.
But what I'm not about to do is let the error of somebody else's ways hang all of us out to dry.
Tiffany, do not run to no rural south. I don't know what you're on, but it's nothing down here.
There are people in our communities that have never seen the promise, the dream, or the hope of America.
It's a luxury, y'all, to dream.
And at some point, the way that you treat the poorest, the most vulnerable among you becomes the truth for all of us.
Everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own fact. Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media.
Welcome.
Welcome home, y'all. This is episode 81, count 'em, 81 of Native Land Pod, where we give you our breakdown of all things politics and culture.
Yo.
Hey, somebody in the building.
I can see it on Tiff.
Somebody in the building.
Face.
Y'all, they making fun of me because I always interrupt. I get excited when they say welcome home. I'll be like, yeah. What's up? We in this bed.
Let us just get through the intro, Andrew.
Right.
I can just see it on her face.
I wasn't
like,
going to do it. I wasn't going to do it.
I know, but I wanted to troll, sir.
We are your hosts. They've introduced themselves already. Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, and I'm Andrew Gillum. What's going on, ladies?
Hi, guys.
Where y'all at? What you doing?
I'm in New York.
There
Looks
it
like
is.
Angela's in her wall of flowers in Seattle.
Yep, she is on the wall.
Yeah.
Looking good, girl.
On the wall?
No, I mean, you
Or
know,
off the wall?
Off the wall. You're
Michael
off
Jackson.
the wall flower.
Yes.
Okay.
You cut that? Pick that up. Before we get into things, y'all, because we crazy, it's a good day. We want to remind you that if you like this show, in fact, if you love this show or like it, we ask that you please go leave a comment, rate, review, and tell your best friends and your friends' friends. I'm sure I did that wrong. Angela, you got a correction for me?
Listen, I don't know what you're doing, but let's keep going.
I know. We basically just telling people, spread the love. If you like
That's
us,
it.
Subscribe, like, tell a friend, tell your mom and them, tell your cousin and them. So
Cousin
you did
and
it
them.
perfectly. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
And tell me what's on your mind today.
Okay, I got something on my mind.
Please.
I really appreciate that our viewers are very vested in this show and have strong opinions. And so we got some great viewer feedback. I saw one of the questions as I was traveling in. So I'm eager to continue the conversation about what we're doing right now, what solutions are, should we be out, in advocacy and solidarity with other communities of color. People had a lot of strong opinions about it. And so, I'm eager to get to some of the thoughts that folks had.
And because you're so eager, friend, we actually going to start with the question I think
Well,
you got
Angela might have had something
about.
that she wanted to talk about.
No. We're not going there now. I said
Okay.
we're going to start
Okay.
with the question I think got you excited this morning.
Yes.
Angela, what do you have today?
Well, there's a lot to be said about democracy.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that. We've been doing this tour, State of the People Power Tour. Janae Nelson said on a panel recently that I moderated in Selma, she talked about democracy being people power. And so as we watch people power crumble, what is our reasonable service and what the hell happened? Why is it crumbling?
Yeah.
Did we ever have it?
Yeah.
Good question. All of that to be litigated in today's show. Not quite litigated, but definitely debated in today's show.
Definitely litigated.
Litigated and debated. No hesitated. We're going to talk about the fall of democracy, if we ever had that thing. And if you agree that democracy has fallen, at least what we were promised of democracy, what do you think the contributing factors are? What helped to get us to this point? And then we can get beyond this point, hopefully, after we start to name what the factors are that have gotten us so deeply in this thing. So let's get it started, y'all. Let's get it started.
Let's do it.
All right, Tiff. I could have this wrong, but I think this might be the question that we were referring to just a few moments ago. Can we roll that cue?
Yo, what up, native land? It is 2:30 a.m. in Memphis, Tennessee. Finna get ready to go to work at a steel plant. And I'm telling y'all missing a lot of perspective. For one, Tiffany, do not run to no rural South. I don't know what you're on, but it's nothing down here. I don't know what type of utopia you're thinking of building, but most people down here are working 70 to 80 hours a week to barely scrape by and feed themselves. So there is no utopia. Y'all gotta buckle up and start advising black people to care about themselves and their finances. The only thing that will get us through this recession that's probably gonna turn into a depression and a devaluation of this American dollar is work. Gotta go to work. And it's not in the streets, it's not protesting. That's any type of job that you can hold, any type of hours that you can get, any type of finances you can bring in for yourself, your family. That's what you focus on. All this other stuff, immigrants, immigration, foreign politics, it don't matter for black people. I don't know why y'all are still stuck on that, but I will go to work. I just hope y'all get out in the community and see that black people, there's a reason your comments look the way they do right now. Y'all had it right after the election. Forget all this. We need to focus on us and our money and our capital. That's it. Peace.
All right.
I have to
Appreciate
say I love
that,
this. Yes, I actually
I love the
question.
He said, "I'm welcome home for real."
He said it's 2:30 in the morning, y'all.
Yeah, I was gonna
Still
say, like,
working.
honestly, shout out to him because working that third shift at 2:30 in the morning is a lot. But I just want to thank everybody for weighing in with their thoughts and comments across YouTube, Instagram, and I can definitely a special shout out to the people who actually watched the show and not just the clips, and had a full comprehensive understanding of what we were saying, and still passionately disagreed with my perspective. And I think it is a very small person who cannot engage in intellectual debate, who will become so offended by another take that you can't take it. So I actually enjoyed reading the comments. I responded to a few, as you all saw. I asked questions of people, especially people who were like, I'm done, and I was curious, like, well, what does being done look like to you? So I just wanted to clarify, and a few mistakes that I made. One, a lot of people were saying, please cite your sources. From where are you getting these numbers? Which is very fair. And normally I always try to do that. And my apologies for not doing that. But just so you all know, I am never doing a 30-second Google search while we're on the air and presenting that to you as facts. These are things that I have read about, researched, cross-tabs, talked to people, talked to experts, really dug into it out of respect for having this platform and out of respect for the people who tune in every week. And so I went to the community pages, AAPI Vote, the Arab League of Voters, I may have that wrong, the Latino Vote, Unido US, AP Votecast, talk to social scientists. And just something I want to caution people on those numbers is exit polling is notoriously unreliable. And so that's why you have to have multiple sources when you're looking at who voted and how they voted, because that often changes. And so when this data was coming out, among a lot of the curious folks, we were all looking at it and side chatting and talking about it. So thank you guys for asking, for being curious enough to know, well, where did you get these numbers? The utopia that he's referencing, I want to let him know, I'm not talking about my imagination. I'm talking about what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I've gone to bear witness to. And out of respect for those communities, because of our bloody, violent history with whiteness in this country, I don't want to name them or say exactly where they are. But there are numerous communities across the Bible Belt of the South that are building community, that exists. They work, and they're Black towns with Black mayors, Black city council, Black-owned grocery stores. So these things do exist. I do take his point about, people are working 70, 80 hours a week. And so that's some of the things that I've been talking about. Well, how do we construct something like that? And I don't have all the answers, but I do have some. I do have some ideas that I'm exploring. And I would just say this about being in South, because he was like, y'all talking about, he said foreign politics. I think he meant foreign policy and the immigration issue. And I just want to clarify that it is not my ministry ever to work with people who are anti-Black. there may be somebody out there to do that, and is work for you if you got it to give. So I was not saying for all the people who voted for Trump in these communities, let's gather them and try to convince them. That's not what I do. I don't enjoy convincing. But I'm saying for the people who did not, I thought first it's just important that we know actual facts. Well-researched, documented facts matter. Even in some of the comments, I saw a lot of misinformation that I would try to correct. And so it was important because the media narrative, and some people were dropping links like, no, this is wrong because look at this article. And I actually would. So thank you guys for actually, doing research and saying, but look at this article. When you do that, I would advise articles often take on a narrative. So, for example, if I'm looking at polling, I'm not going to just look at the article that qualifies the polling. I'm going to look at what they hyperlinked. Where did they get this information from? So if they say something like, well, I'm just making this up. This is not a real number. If they say something like 9 out of 10 people in the Arab community voted for Trump, that's not a real number. I'm making that up. But I'm going to look at this with some intellectual curiosity. What are you basing this on? If this is an exit poll, who are you considering in the Arab community? Who are these people? Was it specific to a region? Or when you say this, did your polling, because not all polls are created equal. When you say this, are you including people under 18, undocumented migrants who can't vote? And sometimes you will find that the data does include that. I'm not a social scientist, so I often have to lean on people who are. I talk for hours to Fernan Amandi, Terrence from Hit Strategies, who Angela knows, Cornell Belcher, Celinda Lake, people who can understand these things better. So just combing through that data is really important. White-run newsrooms will say something, and then when you look into it, often there's a nuance that they miss. My only ask of people is that we care. I'm not even saying go out and do anything right now because I don't know what that is. Andrew, I would love for you to address what he said about protesting because, to be honest, I don't know that I'm in a protest state of mind. I don't know that I'm in the state of mind of – I don't think that my position has changed since the election. I think I still feel the same way. I think I'm still feeling like, is this a democracy that we even want to uphold? I'm choking. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
I'm getting choked up. I don't even know.
If you want to, Tiff, we can come back to you so you can mute and get some water
sorry,
as well.
Guys.
You know how Angela feel about coughing.
No,
I'm just saying just so she can.
Well, she don't like coughing
moment.
if you're near her. She's a germaphobe, and I feel the same way. But I just wanted, I'll wrap this up because I do probably need to cough, but I would just say the only thing I'm suggesting is to ally with the people who are our allies, who are people. Yes, I've gone into these communities and talked about anti-Black work. I'm not a policy person, though thank you to my co-hosts who tell me I am, but I've never worked on policy. But I have gone into communities and done anti-Black work in the Arab community, in the API community, in the Latino community. I've helped with research. I've sat on panels. I'm not a researcher, but I've been interviewed. I offer some Black perspective to these communities and organizing work that I've done across all communities of color, including the indigenous communities. So I just want you all to understand when I bring something to you, it is thought out. You don't have to agree, and I definitely appreciate people's perspectives, but at 14% of the population, I just don't know that this is a war that we can go at alone. I think we do have to have soldiers. And if, 48% of Latino men voted for Trump, of course that number is too high. Of course there's anti-Black sentiment. But that could also mean that there's 52% of people that we may be able to reach and lock arms with. Even if you disagree with that, I think when it comes to having a man yanked out of his home and sent to an offshore torture camp, I think we have to dig in our humanity a little bit just to care. Because if we don't think we're on the same path of destruction, we're misguided. So anyway, I want to hear what you guys have to say, because I think what his point also was, like, all that protesting and F all this kind of gets to what Angela was saying that she wants to talk about. And I don't know that I disagree with that. Like, I don't know that I feel differently from F all this. I can say F all this and still have the heart to care about fellow human beings.
I hear you.
One I want to shout out is Do-Rag. I really do. I just think that it's dope that he felt that at home to come on.
Welcome
just
home.
his true
Family,
self.
welcome
I
home.
love it. The other thing that I really that's present for me is, and I feel like I say this all the time, the number of Black folks who have changed how we see the world, who impacted our access to civil rights, who impacted how incredible we see ourselves. So many of them were either children of immigrants or immigrants themselves. Marcus Garvey comes to mind, a child of an immigrant. Malcolm X comes to mind. And I think the other thing that is bothering me as, we do this tour is one of our partners is the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And they released a paper recently, right after Trump's first 100 days. And they're talking about the number of Black migrants who are being impacted by what's going on. And I think that's another thing. For whatever reason in our minds, and I'm saying our minds, we see immigration as a brown problem, and that just couldn't be further from the truth. So for example, the cut to temporary protected status, which was set to expire on August 3rd, 2025, is set to expire on August 3rd, 2025. 500,000 Haitian people will be impacted by that. There are 552,957 Black immigrants who are eligible for TPS from 6 other countries who will be impacted by that. There is a whole research paper about that. I'll make sure that Nick on our production team gets a link to that so you can see that. I implore you, even if you just read the executive summary, to look at how many Black people are impacted by this. So the very bottom line that Tiff just referenced around us being 12, some people argue 13, 14% of the population, that includes Black migrants, fam. So your numbers get real low after that. I live in Seattle. Our Black port commissioner, who I hope we have on this show soon, is a Somali woman who is so down for the cause and fighting for folks who are both migrants and folks who are from here for multiple generations. So I just think that we really have to thread this needle a little better. And I'm not saying that my sentiment has changed much from the election either. But what I'm not about to do is let the error of somebody else's ways hang all of us out to dry. So I am going to fight to protect whatever protections we have left.
Yeah. Y'all, I sort of thought that when we had this conversation, we weren't asking people to abandon their care for us, for our community, for Black folks. I kind of had the conversation. I assumed we were having the conversation in the light of, if this is happening to those adjacent, right next to us, could be, cousins down the road, right? Probably are in some shape or form, if we were to really trace back, right? That if this happening there, can you imagine what it's going to look like when it hits us? Mm-hmm. That almost as a cautionary note, that these folks aren't playing and they're not discriminating. They want all the Black and brown folks wrangled up and shipped out and off to someplace. I'd love to appeal to the humanity of all of us to care about one another. In fact, I was my twins graduated from 5th grade last week, now going into middle school, God help us all.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One of the songs that they sang at their graduation was "We Are the World." And I remember looking at the Netflix documentary of like The Greatest Night, which was the recording of that. And of course, that song was about ending the tremendous hunger deficit that had hit various parts of Africa, but in South Africa. And then those entertainers traveled the world to bring attention, funding, food. These were Black folks in America doing what they could for folks on the continent, largely Black folks on the continent, but people on the continent who wouldn't necessarily relate to us as African Americans, right? But rather as descendants of various parts of the continent. That we have to be bigger. We have to. In fact, it'd be a pretty damn depressed place to live if all we ever did was concentrate on the me of it all. Largely because we are likely then going to miss the next attack, the next onslaught that's coming our way because we're so barreled in. So I don't think this is lecture season. I just think I just want, to join you all in clarifying. I wasn't necessarily really appealing to the greater humanity, but rather cautionary note all over the place. We're seeing it happen everywhere. And when it hits your block, and I still maintain, people plug in when you're not just on their street, but you got to be up the drive and damn near coming in the house before we recognize the severity of the threat. Otherwise, it's kind of white noise in the space.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would say, y'all, and I'd love to get y'all's feedback here, is this idea of, you described, Tiffany, a utopia. And I feel you and I felt you while you were describing that, even without the real lived examples of where it's happening. But it brings me back to our conversation in your house, on your couch and on your floor a couple of years ago, where we were talking about imagination. Like if we had a whiteboard and we were in control of the pen and we could write this thing however we wanted it, what we would look like, how our families would look, what marriages for us would look like, what a success redefined, this time by us, look like. But it really does reemphasize it's a luxury, y'all, to dream. It's a luxury to pull back and say, man, if we could do it all over again. And by the way, this doesn't mean you can't be poor and have imagination. You can be any stripe, but it just does require us lifting above our circumstances to say, man, if I had my druthers, this is what it would look like out of anybody's box. There are no boxes. There are no walls. There's no ceiling. There's no floor. It's just whatever I think. And I wish for our people, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, that we could really collectively, individually dreamcast and then start to take the steps that might help us actualize what those dreams might be.
That's a good exercise, I think, for the audience. Just as we get into this conversation about democracy, if you were its agent, if you were, and I almost don't want to use the word democracy. I want to use the word constructing of society, because we're so entrenched in what colonialism placed in our heads about what democracy even is. So throw out that word and just you have a blank slate. What does the construction of a society that's equitable look like? At least that's tapping into the imagination. I have to tell you, Andrew, that conversation we had, as you know, Andrew was kind enough to let me read to him some of the things that I've been writing. And so he knows that I've written about that. And as you were saying that, there are so many conversations I'm having lately that I carry with me. And I want to offer this to the audience. I'll get more into it in my CTA, but I've been having breakfast and coffee, or just sitting with the thinkers, the who I would call intellectuals, the elders, the seers, some. And one person who has been so kind to oblige me with his time, I have to beg him for weeks, and then out the blue, he'll say, okay, I can meet for, breakfast now. But every time it's like 5 hours, and that's Dr. Greg Carr, who is just a visionary. And I get to just worship and sip from his fountain as he talks me through things. Sometimes it's not a name you would know, Sometimes it's just Miss Pauline, who's 86 years old, living in one of these communities, Black communities, who lets me sit on her porch with her for hours, Sometimes it's the Uber driver, and it's not just talking to me about what's happening in America, but, I read a book on the Armenian genocide, something we never even knew about. And it just feels for me like a time of listening. Like sometimes, and you have to believe this, but sometimes I just want to say, shut the up. Like, stop talking and listen. Close your mouth and stop trying to debate and learn. Be quiet in your stillness. And even in some of the comments that were a bit more combative, it's like, yeah, you want to debate with me all day, and I'm not even thinking about you. Like, I'm like, think big, debate with yourself. And I don't even say that in an ugly way. I mean, debate with yourself in terms of challenge your own notions. Have some curiosity for yourself about what does this all mean? And I think when we think about like conversations like this, and when I get to just sit and listen to people and I can ask my questions, because I'm not asking questions in debate, I'm asking questions from a place of thirst for knowledge, from your wise decades spent in these years that nothing but days on this earth can afford you. Like, what have you witnessed? What have you learned? And in the silken linings of your hands, can you pass some of that on to me? And I will tell you, I really feel resigned to, I don't know that we survive this as a species. And listening and talking to the elders and trying to think about that. So it does feel to me very much like the beginning of the end of times. It may not be in our lifetime, but it does feel like that. I don't know how we go this far and go back. So as we think about democracy and move into that conversation, I would just invite us to think about not just what happened here, but what's happened here 100 times before this moment happened. Because these moments have happened. Time is a flat circle on repeatedly, again and again. 100 years ago this happened. 500 years ago this happened. 1,000 years ago this happened. And that's what reading affords you. That's what listening and learning with curiosity affords you. A knowledge base of what has happened. We are not new here. We're not so arrogant to think we're the first people to face this. So I don't know. I'm struggling with a lot of this, particularly about the protest piece. I'm not protesting. I do kind of still feel like fuck all this. But how can we protect those of us who have a desire to live comfortably and safely while we're remaining here? I know that sounds morbid.
No.
Morbid,
I mean, you're taking
me
back to my Kojic upbringing, where every Sunday is we living in our last days. I swear to God, I was going to die before we made it home from church. I mean, I was terrified. But in all seriousness, my griot was my grandmother who would say, and I said this to y'all after we had cut last week, there ain't nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Right? I would come home thinking I had the greatest new revelation. And, just in her sober, old Southern country specialized way, there ain't nothing new under the sun. We've seen this before. And I actually think that that's part of the superpower of our people. A lot of times, those voices are the sobering ones when we think the train is over the cliff. And it sometimes takes those folks who have been here a little while, seen a little something, to just remind us, we've survived this.
Yeah.
We're going to survive it, again. We will have to dig into your fatalist view of, things. But Angela, what you got on this before we transition to your topic?
I feel like we transitioning.
Oh, well, then there it is. I didn't want to move
I'm saying
without...
everything we've been saying, I think, is talking about what has gone wrong, which is the topic Angela wants to get to.
So I think we have all individually challenged this notion of whether or not we actually live in a democracy, if it ever truly was. And of course, the founders of this country, when establishing its foundational documents, very clearly described this as a republic. A democratic republic, which is, in the way that they shaped and formed this thing, that we would basically send a certain class of person to act in our best interest and on our behalf. Basically, this notion of a trustee over us rather than a delegate. And these were people who would then take in information and decide based off their worldview what should be what. I don't know that is the truest reflection of what we might understand a democracy to be, but it's certainly what the founders passed on to us. So before we get too deep into the question of whether or not this thing has been lost and what led to it being lost, I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on whether or not how would you, in your own description, describe democracy, if that's the thing that you want us to strive toward? What would be your definition of what democracy is? Doesn't have to be Webster's, but just what what's out of the heart. You may be muted, sis.
I sure am. I'm
Yep.
back. I can tell you what it's not, but before I get into my definition, maybe we take a quick break, and then when we get on the other side of the break, we can hear from Scott Pelley from 60 Minutes.
Get it.
But in this moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts. The fear to speak in America. Power can rewrite history with grotesque, false narratives. They can make criminals heroes and heroes criminals. Power can change the definition of the words we use to describe reality. Diversity is now described as illegal. Equity is to be shunned. Inclusion is a dirty word. This is an old playbook, my friends. There's nothing new in this.
Ain't nothing new under the sun.
Yep. Lasting evil days for 400 years. So I think there are a couple things. The first thing that comes to mind is a chicken's coming home to roost moment where I'm feeling like, welcome to the America that many of our people have always seen. They've never seen the other America that these folks regularly describe. They've never seen it. There are people in our communities that have never seen the promise, the dream, or the hope of America. We're hearing that in more stops than not. And the other thing that I'm feeling is we really about to all die. Like it is like the convergence. Yeah, it's the convergence of both. Like it is I feel frustrated that it took all of this for people to understand how on the brink we've been for many years. Some people would argue that the brink was Citizens United. Some people would argue that the brink was Mitch McConnell not confirming Barack Obama's pick for the Supreme Court. Some people would argue that it came, the moment that the Supreme Court said, in the Shelby versus Holder case, that we're going to actually gut the Voting Rights Act. Some would argue that it became the moment that the Voting Rights Act became a partisan measure. Some would argue it came as soon as this black man said, yes, we can. Some would argue that it became an issue in 1619. And I think regardless of when you make the argument, the fact remains that there are people who have cautioned us, like John the Baptist in the Bible, for many years that this has been problematic. And we have not taken heed to any of the caution. We didn't take heed when the person by the side of the road said, I'm hungry and there's no refuge for me. We didn't take it as a cautionary measure when kids couldn't work in the summer. We didn't take it as a cautionary measure when people couldn't afford health care. And at some point, the way that you treat the poorest, the most vulnerable among you becomes the truth for all of us. And that is where we are right now. So now we're all crying out, help, relief is needed, SOS, SOS. But now it's too late. Arguably, it's too late. Like there has to be quite the shift in order for it to be different. I don't know that a midterm election could save us, particularly where everybody's votes won't count. Because everybody's votes haven't counted for over a decade.
Forever.
Right? Well, I'm saying in modern history for over a decade, right? Like I don't know. That's all I got.
Well, can I just give the audience a little bit of context on the Scott Pelley speech? Because the reason why that speech was such a big deal, so many people talked about it, it went viral, is because it was a speech that he gave at Wake Forest. And as you all know, Scott Pelley is one of the longest correspondents with 60 Minutes. This is why it matters. And we'll see if he returns, because everything he said in that speech was truth. However, 60 Minutes is, of course, on CBS, which is under Paramount. Paramount is trying to... Sherry Redstone, who is the majority shareholder of Paramount, Sumner Redstone's daughter, is trying to sell Paramount to Skydance. Now, when you're trying to sell something that big, you got to... Right, which involves the FTC and the DOJ. Now, because the Trump administration they made a big deal and essentially lied because they've been attacking media. I won't get into all the minutia, but they've been attacking media. And so 60 Minutes have come under fire because they said that their claim falsely and incorrectly that they were partial to Kamala Harris during the election. And so as a result, the executives at Paramount say to 60 Minutes, they start trying to filter some of their stories. And they say to them, we want to see everything you're doing for the rest of the season that has anything to do with Trump. 60 Minutes has always been the gold standard in journalism. Yeah. So for them to say something like that, your news division always operates independent of any business dealings. For them to say that to the gold standard, to 60 Minutes, it was so jarring that the executive producer quit. Don Hewitt quit. And so then you had Scott Pelley come out and close the show and kind of say at the end, it is a sad day for this broadcast. Like, I cannot believe that they're asking us to do this. And he gave this, very glowing farewell to the executive producer who left. So for him to come out at Wake Forest University and say declaratively, this is a problem in our society, I just wonder how that's going to play within the halls of Paramount, particularly at CBS. So just kudos to him. And I think this is a prime example of what you have to do to hold the line, because not too many people have been holding the line in any part of this democracy, least of all the media. And I would argue Congress, all the branches of government, all of our core principles around what holds a society, no one has been holding the line. So I love Scott Pelley for that. I'm happy he said something. I've had some criticisms of CBS over the years, but they have done solid reporting, solid journalism. So I'm happy that he said that, and it punctuated all the points that Angela made, Andrew.
I love it. If what does democracy look like to each of you? If we can recognize that that what we have right now doesn't resemble what we think democracy is supposed to be. Angela, you mentioned in your comments that you on this tour are interfacing with folks who have never been on the beneficiary side of the American dream. They've only known the horror to the story, only lived the horrors of the story. And in fact, in many instances have had the institutions weaponized and turned against them for as long as memory serves. So we know what it isn't, but what is it?
I think it's the antithesis of everything we see crumbling, right? Like, I think that in order for us to construct something different, I think Tiff has been saying on the show almost weekly that she doesn't think that this is salvageable. And I think in order for us to determine, where the trouble lies, where are all of the issues, we have to talk about what is broken. So from the legislature to the judiciary to the media, the responsible of the media. You talked earlier on this call about campaign finance issues, the access to the voting booth. We're in a society where, as he just talked about in the excerpt of the speech we played, where diversity and difference is called illegal, right? Like, I don't know what else you can say about that. And then the construct of a two-party system where you have to figure out a way to force yourself into a space that may or may not really represent your interests. Mm-hmm. There are a bunch of issues, and I think that it would do our podcast good and our community good to even engage around this about what are all the broken pieces. There are focus groups that were done over the last several weeks, and then this Catalyst report that came out. But in these focus groups, they go and they talk to Black folks who've traditionally been Democratic voters about all of the issues they see with the party. Well, the issues that they see with the party are also the things being reflected back in society, right? The party, the Democratic Party, is seeing itself as the thing that should be the protector of a system that in so many ways is an affront to us, has been disrespectful to us, has not seen us, has not valued us, and has treated many of us as a transaction.
Sure.
I'm not suggesting that we go to the other party. I'm suggesting that we find ourselves homeless, you know, and I think that is another real issue. So we are wrestling with a crisis that we saw play out in an election in this past fall. We are seeing one that played out in an election in 2016 on the other side of a pandemic in 2020, where people can question damn science. You know, I mean, that I think is the erosion of democracy too. Like, climate change is a thing, and they are arguing that it's not a thing, and then going to double down in the things that cause the greatest harm, against clean drinking water, against access to, anyway.
I'll camp out here because I think there are a lot. I would just say two things. One, when we got to the point, and I would make the argument that Fox News is probably the largest, if not singletary contributor to this, except that they are regulated through the FCC, and then within the broadcast and the news and journalism community is supposed to be another check on it, which I would argue has completely failed. But when Fox News got in the position where they could disconnect facts from basically that there would be no true arbiter of what is real and what isn't. So they eroded the lines, they confused the facts and came up with alternative facts, and then made alternative facts a thing, right? When really an alternative fact is a lie. And an alternative fact is false. But they were able to blur the lines between what is somebody's opinion and then what is a fact. Everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own fact. The facts are what they are, and you can derive from them whatever opinion you may wish. But there are some agreed upon foundational things that if we're both looking at this goddamn paper and we see 12 and 12 is the only number on there, you can't say 32. And unfortunately, they got away with that. And there's that genie has not been put back in a bottle at all. In fact, it's running rampant all throughout the society. And our failure at the regulatory place to enforce some dictum, some regulatory consequence for that erosion is the fault of a democracy, is the fault of the institutions failing, largely due to cowardice, I would submit. The other thing I would say is democracy to me doesn't and shouldn't equal a two-party system.
Right.
In fact, I think I would like to imagine a place where parties, different than what they do today, where they have statutory significance and presence. There are lines and laws that describe how Democrats and Republicans are to then extract power or assume their power in our democracy, and it gives no regard to other minor parties, none of any significance. So what if everybody at the age of 18 or 16 were able to vote without registering? What if by right of the fact that you were a U.S. citizen, that you can go in any ballot box wherever it is that you call yourself home and vote on any election? And why is it that if you are a Democrat or Republican, you're the only ones who participate in a primary, and everybody else has to wait to the very end before people even know that there's a race to be considered? An election has happened, and they haven't even been able to consume the information because they're not a part of the Democratic or the Republican Party. In fact, in many states, no party affiliate and independent is the majority registration. Mm-hmm. So if we were to abolish the fact that you didn't have to be a Democrat or a Republican, and that the systems and laws were not constructed to value you above everybody else, what if in a democratic society, we had branches of government that were actually accountable to the people that put them there, meaning the voters, rather than the moneyed interests that runs roughshod over everything? Regulatory, governance, you name it, they got it. I think in a democracy, your history as a former felon should be of no consequence once you've repaid your debt to society, meaning you served your time. And if you don't have a felony and you're incarcerated, you should be gift wrapped your ballot box because you still have the right to vote. Yet many of people who are sitting in jail yet waiting a trial are never, ever reminded of the fact that they still have their constitutional and legal rights to vote. So from top to bottom, the system is designed for the powerful to keep power. And that's Democrat or Republican. For those in power to keep power and everybody else to hell with you. They could care less. And then we wonder why people complain about never having their streets paved, no libraries, no fresh food markets, no recreation that includes trees and paved park and bike lanes and so on and so forth. They've already told us that we don't matter. And then we try to do this exercise of get out to vote, get out to vote, get out to vote. And folks are like, vote for what?
I just want to say bike lanes are for terrorist activity. They stress me.
You sound like my mama about roundabouts.
Anyway.
But that's the point, right? Yeah. The needs, the basic needs, the stuff that's so essential is a dream to people because that's how bad the system fails us. I'm done on it, Tiff.
Well,
I know you.
I feel like I am in a different state of mind than you and Angela, maybe, because what you guys are talking about all makes sense. You know, I don't disagree with anything you said. That is how you can fix this broken system that exists now. I think my perspective is still developing, you know, so y'all give me some grace to the audience as I'm figuring out what makes sense. Right. I just want to make it clear to the audience. Like I'm trying to figure this shit out myself. I don't know that this is a system. Like even what you all are talking about, if we tap into our imagination, it talks about the system itself. And even an idea of voting, the idea of even having prisons. You know, these are things that I don't know that I connect with anymore. As soon as I realize that this is all just a set of unspoken guidelines that are not truly enforceable, then it just became, well, then what are we even doing here? Enough people just decided, well, fuck this Constitution. Like, what emoluments clause? We don't care about that. You know, who cares about this 14th Amendment? Who cares? If they can tap into their imagination on that level, then we can go a lot further. So I don't even know. Like when we talk about the party, I got to be honest, I don't really care about the Democratic Party right now. That's not, you know, I don't feel aligned. Now, that is not to say that we should not vote and we should not hold them accountable. Sure. You know, like we gave them power. And I mean that specifically. We gave them power. We are the voting base. But I mean, if we look at the macro and not the micro, even this idea of capitalism, you know, that was born out of the plantation and slavery. Even this idea of how far we've come. Well, you know, in reading, it will show you if we start with slavery, then everything we done look like progress. But if you go before that, we still in debt. We are still having those problems. So when we ask the question, what does democracy look like to us? That's why I say I kind of got to strike the term democracy. I talked about this before. The book, The Poisonwood Bible, where they, historical fiction, where they talk about the reign of Lumumba and the, local savages, as the white people looked at them, talked about how American democracy makes no sense. You telling me this 18-year-old boy got as much power as me and I'm a chief? And his opinion counts the same as mine? You telling me because 49% of your people can be unhappy just because 51% of your people like it? That makes sense to y'all in America?
Yeah, they sound like the founders.
This is my point. When you look at the founders, this is why I say reading, and right now is a time for reading, listening, and learning. I wonder when Abraham Lincoln said, you know what? When he called the black folks and said, I don't want to live with y'all because y'all ain't never going to let us forget slavery. And we don't want to be reminded of that shit. Y'all going to always be mad at us. We going to be mad at y'all. I think y'all should just get the fuck out. I'm wondering now, like, you know what? He might have had a point. Because if we are still fighting these same battles, and it's true, we have never confronted that history. So if we're still fighting that, I just don't know that trying to save, repair, or build a system within this construct of whiteness and white power and a ruling class that has been overwhelmingly white makes sense for us. So I don't know that we can serve. Even if I thought it was salvageable, I don't know that it's possible to save it when looking at a multi-racial, multi-ethnic society where everyone arrives to participate on equal footing. I think they will worship their true God, and that is power, and they will destroy everything in its path before they allow that to happen.
I actually think, I don't think there's a race to power. Right now, we can associate a race to power, right? Because it's been the same ones in charge for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think were it all Black people in charge, we would still have a problem with the corrosive effects of power. We gave the example of
power.
Abuse of power.
Well, I think power inevitably leads to abuse. I don't know that there is a model of a ruling class, of a powerful class that doesn't act to protect itself.
I think a ruling. Yeah.
That's something, Andrew.
I think a ruling class is exactly the point. Like if you are constructing a society based on there being a ruling class, the folks at the bottom will always strive to get to the top, and the folks at the top will always strive to protect their status. But if you construct a different type of society, which is where I was going to go, Tiff, I don't think that any of my remarks were about fixing the system. I think I was trying to bring us into a conversation that deepens us into where the problems are, but not to rebuild it as is. I think it's about trying to ensure that we don't rebuild the same broken system. And I don't support having a ruling class. Like, I think that there has to be something that feels a little more democratic, something that feels a little more power for all people. I'm sure when the Fox News types and all of their supporters and the people that boost their content, the Republican talking heads, get a hold of this, we gonna sound like socialist Marxists, I'm sure. But I do think that the reality of it is when you have a few, the top 1%, which, by the way, economically, we're in the 1% in this country. When you try to protect the 1% or the 0.1%, you're always going to have a challenge. You're always going to have a problem. I don't think that that's the right structure for us to develop or for us to be a part of. There are societies, especially on the continent and in other places, that exist that are not this combative and this troubled and this oppressive.
Most of them are autocratic. It's looking to a singular person or a person in their family, the derivatives thereof, as the leaders. There is a reason why that style of governance has lasted so long in so many places across these continents.
But can you say what you said again, Andrew, about power? You were saying it lives to protect itself.
For sure. You name a powerful person or powerful institution that is prepared to walk away from that power, decentralize it down for others. That's cannibalism. Nobody is, or suicide. I mean, to put it differently. Okay, think of a doctor. And when the doctor explains to you, well, the reason why your wrist swole up the way that it did is because your body perceived an invasion. And it believed that invasion was intended to destroy you, to kill you. So the body sends all of its resources to that space of penetration to make sure that we don't die. The body, I don't care how you put it. If you try to drown yourself, your body reflexively is going to want to survive. Mm-hmm. It is going to want to live. I compare that the same way as I would to a ruling class. Regardless of what your better, higher angels are, your body means to remain in control. Your status of people mean to have it their way. They can look as gratuitous as they want to. They can talk as graciously and gratuitously as they want to, including the billionaires who want to give away half their wealth or more than half their wealth. Give away half your wealth. Your children's 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 children, plus, will still be filthy wealthy. So they're not nihilistic about it, right? They're not saying, I don't want nothing to go to my children's 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 children. No. They want their children's children's children to enjoy the same privilege that they do walking this earth today.
So then that's capitalism.
They just don't mean to be vainglorious about it. That's a version of capitalism, but it's also capitalism as a route to power.
Right. So I think that's what Angela was describing. Like in the ruling class, you'll have the top trying to protect itself. You'll have the bottom trying, being aspirational. Right. That is the system of capitalism. So to me, everything you all are saying is like, challenges with this existing system.
Take away the money. Take away the money then, and then just deal with the people in charge. Who gets to make the decisions? Everybody still wants to be the decider. Everybody can't be the decider. And the deciders of today want to stay the deciders. And if they're not the ones, they want their progeny to be the deciders, because they never want their kids disadvantaged.
But so this, I think, gets to the other point we were making. Like the power, as we know, concedes nothing. And if you're saying power, feeds itself, which is true. Like it is a cannibalistic entity that people desire, people chase it. I think we saw some of that in some of the voting trends that we have seen over the past few decades.
We see it in some of the attitudes around immigrants, from immigrants.
You jumped and took my point, but
I'm sorry.
No. I'm happy you did. You were in my mind because that's where I was going. Even we, on some level, have some power. We don't have, what the ruling class has, but we have some power, and our attitude has been, hands off, forget them. Not ours collectively, but a few people in community have been in isolation. Like, no, that's what's going to happen there. And I just wonder, in that society where you have that kind of attitude, how do we win? And and I guess that's why my thoughts are just, I don't want to say elevated as in higher, but elevated as in I'm looking down at what's happening, trying to understand it all and trying to look backwards, what happened 1,000,000 years ago, what happened 1,000 years ago, what's happening right now, and what's coming. And with that, I have to say all empires fall. There has not been one in history that hasn't. So this definitely very much feels like this is the fall of this empire. Yeah. And then what does that mean for humanity writ large? When you look at the populist movements across the globe, when you look at the genocides that we've only heard about a few, but there have been many, 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 and there are still many happening. I'm reading this book, Sky Full of Elephants. It happens to be fiction. I'm reading 2 books, but this is my fiction that I'm reading. And Sky Full of Elephants is a work of fiction, but it definitely taps into the mind. And the premise is one day, every white person walks into the ocean. They just are in a trance and they walk into the ocean and they're gone. And then you have a society that's left. And what does that society look like? You have biracial kids whose moms are white, who are devastated. They grew up in a white world. They're sad. You have, Black people trying to figure out how to maneuver. And there's a rumor like, don't go to the South. Just stay out the South. It's awful. But that's where all the Black people are. And you get down there and it is peace. It is an oasis, but they've been telling everybody, don't go down there because it is something to protect. Yeah. And no, it's a work of fiction. It has a lot of history in it and pulls on a lot of things that happen. Like the original Mardi Gras, I think, was in Mobile, which I never knew. So it gives a lot of history. But it has been tapping into my imagination about, what does that look like? Because we're not going to have that society. But by 2044, we will be a society where there is no racial majority. So in that sense, what might that look like? And is that leading us further into this civil war that exists right now? And in that case, they outarm us. They outnumber us. We got a lot of people on our side saying, nope, we know that, and we still not trying to ally. We'll go it alone at the 12%. And it's got me questioning even our population. Angela, you said, 12%, 13%, some may be 14%. There are some people who surmise that the census is a hypothesis. It's a guess because, they do overhead, they do scaling, they do, right. And so, what's got me thinking, when you look at places like Jackson, Mississippi, where we'll be this week, I hope to see y'all there.
Yeah. Come on out.
In Mississippi, are we 39% of the population, or might we be half? Or might we be 60%? Like, there might be some interest in saying that we are a minority in that space. And if that's the case, I got to question everything.
We also don't all voluntarily participate in the census. Folks have said for years, like, that we need to encourage greater census participation. There are a lot of folks that, because of the system that you're talking about challenging right now, don't trust the government, don't want them to know where they live, don't want to, like, even if they have a whole mortgage that is searchable, they still
think
are
it's
like,
off the grid.
but this part right here, I don't want to do. Yeah. So there's that too. The other thing is now, since the census data, the way that the federal government is collecting research information on race is changing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, so that people are about to be collapsed into one category or the other. Yes.
With the indigenous community specifically. Like the 2020 census, you might think, the indigenous population just exploded. But that's not true. It was people claiming an indigenous heritage that were not necessarily acknowledged by tribal communities. And so now, if you look at that, how does that inform resources? And then will that be a battle? Over who tribal communities determine
the census
who
has
exists.
always been a tool of the powerful. I mean, it has always been a tool, right? And they've always projected. They've never had actual person-to-person counts.
I can't remember. Do they count people who are incarcerated?
Yes.
Yes, they do. For
what's the category?
For aggregation of congressional districts, where a bunch of Republicans are representing, 50,000 people outside of jail, and the other 200,000 are incarcerated in their districts. Yes, they count them. They just don't appropriate for them fully, but they do count them in those districts to create congressional districts. But Tiff, you made a point that I just want to, because you and I privately talked about this. A lot of folks celebrate the browning of America, and I'm not one who doesn't celebrate it. I just don't believe that it leads to a specific political outcome. Yes. I don't think that it means that all black and brown people then get together, harmonize.
I agree.
And are like, we're the majority now. I don't think that's what happens.
We're the global majority now, and it's not happening. So, of course.
Again, back to my original hypotheses around power, is that these alliances are going to come together around how you piece together enough people to make the ruling class.
Yeah.
And then it will act just as
a caste.
The previous ruling class. It will act to protect itself. And it will not only act to protect itself, it will act to ensure that you're never going to threaten it. Mm-hmm. So then the tools of the weapons of government, governance, and everything that descends from it will be weaponized for their purposes, to keep them in charge. And yes, all empires fall. Very few of those empires that have fallen have predicted their fall.
Right.
And my guess is, and I hate to think this way, but I believe it to be true, that when this empire falls, the empires that will rise will be helmed by autocratic leaders. Mm-hmm. I think it is the simplest form of government. It is the most understood form of government. It is the longest lasting form of government. Remember, democracy in the way we do it here in the U.S. is an experiment, right? A minority amongst the community of nations.
The American experiment, yeah.
It's an experiment. And there are people high and low in every hemisphere, on every continent, that are championing the failure of this experiment because it threatens the longest standing tradition of governance, which is of autocratic leaders, monarchies or autocrats who take power and they helm it for themselves. When we think radically about what democracy looks like, or really what power looks like, because I want to get outside of the construct there, I think differently than I think how most people think of power. Power is to be hoarded, to be kept among, to be held sacred amongst a few selected people. I believe power is the gift that keeps giving. That the more you empower, frankly, the more power that is inured to you. You are then magnanimous by extending power to your neighbor, and then your neighbor to their neighbor, and their neighbor, and so on and so forth. But most people don't think about power that way, that the more you spread it, the more you actually get it, the more respect, the more deference comes your way if that's what you're in pursuit of. The hoarders of it, which is I think a very Eurocentric model of defining power, says that it must be tightly held between a small selective group of people or institutions, not to be shared democratically. And I think that is what's going to help lead to our collapse, not just as a nation, I think as a people, period. And I don't mean to be going to ending days and ending times, but I think that's our collapse. I'm off. I'm probably going down a rabbit hole here. It's just
I'm down a rabbit hole right now, and this
Yeah.
prison numbers. I started looking it up. This is fascinating. If you're waiting at trial, you don't count. You're supposed to be counted in your residence. Like I didn't even really. Anyway,
unbelievable.
This is fascinating.
Unbelievable.
I think the whole notion of power feeding off itself is like such a philosophical point that I have to sit with. Like I hadn't thought about that, until you said that, which again feeds into this question, what does a construction of society? Because note, I'm not using the term democracy. What does a construction of society look like?
Yeah.
And that, I don't know. And I can picture the audience saying, well, y'all are saying all this, but what are we supposed to do? People are looking to be led. And
I think
people
we
are
should think
asking
out
that,
loud.
Right.
Everybody.
And people were asking that in the comments, like, okay, Tiffany, what would you have us to do? And I was trying to be really clear. All I'm asking is that you care. I'm just saying that you care that the government is disappearing people and sending them to offshore torture camps because we are in that same path of destruction. I don't know what to do. Andrew, you were the one to, suggest protests. I don't know if that's the answer. I simply don't know.
Which I think takes a lot of forms. I hope it didn't immediately think that to just mean go stand on a street corner with a sign. We're protesting right now on Target. I'm just keeping my money.
Yeah.
Or spending it directly with black and brown vendors or whatever. But I actually don't think that the three of us are in any way delusioned enough to think that we can produce the answer right here. I think that if we're truly talking about spreading decision-making and power amongst people, a diverse range of people, then let's be in the practice of it. In fact, as we move to CTAs, I'm sorry, I'll start first. I'm sorry, lady.
Go for it.
But I want to invite our listeners to offer up what their radical views of, and only radical by virtue of the fact that either hasn't been thought of, or maybe it was thought of and once practiced and then abandoned, or you know what, you just sitting on another cloud, like Tiffany and I be doing sometimes when we take walks, philosophizing.
Yes, yeah.
Making up words here. But that's my invitation. I want to be clear about it. I want to invite our listeners to offer up, if you think the system we have right now is broken, tell us, how would you redesign this thing? Maybe you scrap the whole thing and maybe you just offer up your notion of what does a beloved community for you look like? Maybe it is top down with a singular leader. Maybe it is democratized where we come to consensus as a group. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I love that. I'm looking forward to reading those comments. And if we get videos, and still want to remind people, please send in your videos if you want to give us 60 seconds worth of thought. And as you're doing that, don't forget to click like and subscribe and tell a friend if you like this conversation. And again, this is a conversation between us, but it's a conversation between all of us, not just the three of us. And as you see, we definitely look, read, engage with you all because we say welcome home intentionally. My CTA, I'll be quick, is in my time, I'm in a space of study and observation. I'm reading, writing, listening. That's all. Anything that's taking me away from that is an inconvenience. Like from 7 to 7, that is what I'm doing. In a space of learning. And I've always been in that way, but this is even more radical. I'm not watching a lot of TV these days. I am in these books, on my computer writing and listening to people. And it has really elevated my way of thinking, elevated the way I interact, harnessed my energy in a way. And one thing I thought about is as we are all getting older, we're losing a lot of our history. And so my CTA for people is, for those of you who are still blessed to have your grandmother, your great-grandmother, the elders in your life, capture that oral history. Sit with them, listen to them, talk to them. get them on video, because as they're erasing our history, I think it's important for us to capture ours and know it and be shamans to the next generation. Tell them what happened during Jim Crow. Tell them what happened in enslavement. Tell them in the Pan-Africanism way what we brought with us on the boat, what life existed like us before then. And I hope that people take advantage of that time to listen and learn, because even if if you don't have those people, when you're in Uber, like, instead of being on your phone, like, I spend so many time asking Uber drivers, oh, you're from India, what do the people there feel about Modi? Like, tell me what, because I can read in the paper all day, but you live there. Tell me, what are your thoughts about Modi? What is your family's thoughts about Modi? People who live in Pakistan, I'm like, oh, well, what is your thoughts about India? You know, you guys are kind of in a war right now. And I get so much information from people. So I just would encourage other folks, be in a space of quiet listening and learning. I don't enjoy jumping out there giving my thoughts and opinions on everything every 5 seconds. CNN will ask me to come on and do stuff, and I just want to just be quiet and listen sometimes. I don't need to jump and give a soundbite on everything. So that's my CTA. And if you do capture some of that oral history and you got 60 seconds of some good stuff from your grandma, we'll play that too. We want to hear it. That's all I got.
Your soundbites is so good. They're just so good. Angela, CTA.
Speaking of sound bites, I am really tired of us talking to each other. So I want y'all to send in your guest recommendations. We want to hear from other voices. To me, in our recent history, some of our favorite shows have been with guests on air, because it gives us an opportunity to engage in different ways with different voices, different perspectives. We also are going to continue, I think, this series, at least as a segment around democracy being broken and the different pieces that are fragmented. So we definitely want to hear from y'all on that as well, whether you're seeing it on the local level, the state level in your communities, or on the federal level, or even internationally. We want to hear that from y'all too. And lastly, Tiff already shouted it out, but we will be in Jackson this weekend, and we hope to see y'all live at Tougaloo College at 1 p.m. And of course, support State of the People Friday there, as well as on Saturday. And we want to have guests on in Jackson as well. I'm sad Chokwe won't be there. But hopefully we'll be able to see some of our other friends and have them on with us. So we'll see y'all there. We look forward to catching up with our Southern fam with Tiffany's next resident. The man said, I don't know why you want to go to the rural South, Tiffany. What utopia you creating?
I know.
Tiff said, I got one already. She said she ready.
It exists.
I'm going to call him
I want that
because he
brother to
didn't give us
know.
no name.
Well, I appreciate his thoughts. And Chokwe Lumumba is
Durag.
the mayor of Jackson, and I didn't know that he wasn't going to be there. So I'm sorry to miss him, because he's doing some great work there.
Send us your favorite food spots.
Yes.
We like to eat.
Yes. Definitely, for sure. Looking forward to seeing y'all in Jackson.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. And we want to thank you again for just bearing with us. I think today we haven't done this in a long time, but the thinking out loud, the recognizing that we don't have the monopoly on right answers. Actually, rarely do we. But in good company with good intention, I think we can explore all kinds of things, certainly in a space of trust. And we want to invite you in there. So don't forget to send your ideas. We'll be doing a live show, as has already been mentioned, State of the People tour in Jackson, Mississippi, this Saturday, May 31st. Y'all be there. If you're in Jackson, visit stateofthepeople.com to get a ticket.
No.
I'm so sorry.
No.
Visit State of the People?
Stateoftheppl.com, and you don't get tickets. You just register. There's no tickets. I don't want people to think it costs.
I was just reading my note. My bad. But listen to her. She is in charge. It's no fee. You just come as you are.
Reparations.
That's it. We'll be live streaming on YouTube, by the way, on Saturday. So if you can't be there with us in person, check us out on YouTube, and you'll be able to join in the conversation. We'll also be, of course, uploading the feed in case you can't catch us live, so you'll get to see it too. Angela, Tiffany, I'm looking forward to being in good company and good trouble with y'all this weekend. As always, we want to remind everyone to leave a review, subscribe to Native Land Pod. And also tell a friend. We're available on all platforms. And of course, YouTube. New episodes drop Thursday and Friday with solo pods Monday and Tuesday. If you want more, check out Politics, and Off the Cup, CUPP, the other shows that are on Reason Choice Media. I don't have the PP. That was just Cup.
CUPP.
And don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our text or email list on our website, nativelandpod.com. We are, that's A-Rye, that's T Cross, and I'm Andrew Gillum. Welcome home, y'all. There are 523 days until midterm elections. We out.
Thank you for joining the natives. Intentional with the info on all of the latest. Rod Gillum and Cross connected to the statements that you leave on our socials. Thank you sincerely for the patience. Reason for your choice is clear. We're so grateful. Took the oath to execute roles. Yeah, faithful. Preserve, defend, and protect the truth, even if painful. Welcome home to all of the natives. We thank you.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.